There comes a time in every life where the soul knocks, quietly at first, then louder, until it becomes unbearable. This is not the kind of pain you bandage. This is the kind of pain that demands your attention. Because it has something to say, you feel it, a tightening in the chest, a heaviness in the spirit, a confusion that words cannot explain, and yet you resist it, because you were taught to run from discomfort. You were taught that strength is smiling when you're breaking, that healing is avoiding, that winning is never falling. But the truth is far more ancient than your habits. This is going to hurt, but you need it. There is a place within you that you were never taught to enter, not because it is evil, not because it is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. And the unfamiliar terrifies the mind that craves certainty. This place has many names. You might call it your past, your trauma, your shame, but beneath those labels, it is your shadow. The shadow is not the villain of your story. It is the part of you that was silenced when you were too young to defend it. It is your voice mocked, your anger punished, your vulnerability misunderstood, your dreams dismissed, and so to survive you pushed it away. You became who the world applauded. You became the strong one, the polite one, the ambitious one. You buried the mess, you hid the questions, you swallowed the tears, but nothing buried stays buried. It waits, it watches, it whispers through your breakdowns, it screams in your loneliness, it sabotages your relationships, not because it hates you, but because it's trying to be heard. And here's the secret the world won't tell you. You cannot heal what you refuse to face. To rise, you must first descend. To become whole, you must walk into the parts of yourself you swore you'd never touch again. The descent into the shadow is not a punishment. It is an initiation. It is the soul pulling you back into yourself by any means necessary. When you avoid your shadow, it controls you. But when you enter it willingly, when you sit with it, speak to it, and ask it what it's been holding all these years, you begin to reclaim your power. But this descent is not a tidy process. There is no linear path. There is no map. You will feel lost. You will feel raw. You will grieve identities you thought were you. You will resist again and again the urge to turn back, and still, the pull continues, because the soul doesn't care how many masks you wear. It wants the truth, and the truth lives in the places you've abandoned. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It holds the fire you locked away. It holds the intuition you silenced. It holds the creativity you traded for stability. It holds the chaos, yes, but also the brilliance, and it's all you. The descent does not happen overnight. It comes in waves, a memory, a breakdown, a quiet moment where something inside you cracks open. Sometimes it comes through suffering, sometimes through silence, but always it comes with purpose. The descent strips you of pretense. It asks you to stop pretending you're fine. It asks you to stop smiling through your pain. It asks you to finally turn inward and listen to the part of you that's been screaming, "I'm still here." And once you do, once you stop running, something begins to stir in the dark. Something ancient, something honest. You don't yet know who you'll become. You only know that who you were is no longer enough. There is a structure within you that you've spent your whole life building. Brick by brick, thought by thought, year by year, you constructed an identity, a name, a role, a mask. At first, it protected you. It gave you something to cling to in a world that felt too vast, too chaotic. You learned how to be who they wanted, the child that didn't cry, the student who always achieved, the partner who never disappointed, and so the ego was born, not as a flaw, but as a survival mechanism. It became your armor, your performance, your version of truth. But there's a problem. The ego does not seek truth. It seeks control, and when truth comes knocking, when life dares to disturb the illusion, you feel threatened, not because your soul is in danger, but because your identity is. The ego is terrified of death. Even the small ones, the death of being liked, the death of certainty, the death of being right. So it clings to titles, to routines, to relationships that expired years ago. And yet, you feel it, the growing tension between who you've become and who you truly are. You begin to feel hollow in your success. You begin to resent the very image you once worked so hard to create. Because something inside you is awakening, the soul is knocking, and it does not knock politely. It will shake the foundation, it will disrupt your plans, it will let the mask you wear be shattered, publicly if necessary. Why? Because the soul isn't interested in your performance, it wants your truth. And so the ego must break. It must fracture under pressure. It must feel the tremble of uncertainty. It must face its greatest fear, irrelevance. You may resist. You may try to tape the mask back together. You may seek validation, distractions, applause, but none of it will work, because once the fracture begins, it cannot be undone. It is the soul's rebellion against the false life. And what's terrifying is not that you're losing control, it's that you never had it. The persona, the ego, identity was never built for depth. It was built for survival, but you're not here to survive. You're here to awaken, to be transformed, to return to the essence beneath the roles you've played. That kind of transformation requires rupture, disillusionment, disintegration, and yes, it's painful, because everything you thought made you lovable, acceptable, worthy, all of it starts to fall apart. You lose relationships that were built on who you pretended to be. You disappoint those who only loved your mask. You become a stranger to the people who once called you familiar. But even more terrifying, you become a stranger to yourself. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the eyes staring back, not because you've lost yourself, but because you're meeting yourself for the very first time. And in that unraveling, in that beautiful, terrifying undoing, you are being called into something greater than identity. You are being summoned beyond the ego's limits, into something raw, something wild, something real. Suffering. The word alone tightens the chest, doesn't it? Because somewhere deep within, we've been taught that to suffer is to fail, that pain is punishment, that if life hurts, something must be wrong with you. But this belief is a lie, a comfortable lie. And like all lies, it eventually collapses under the weight of truth. You were never promised a painless life. You were born into a world where growth requires loss, and truth requires breaking. And so suffering comes, not as cruelty, but as a messenger. It does not knock gently. It does not wait for permission. It enters uninvited, rearranging the furniture of your life, tearing down the walls you called certainty, and pulling the ground out from beneath your carefully built plans. You lose what you thought you couldn't live without. You watch dreams crumble into dust. You wake up one day and realize the person you were is gone, and yet you are still breathing. What if suffering is not the end of the path, but the beginning of something sacred? What if the pain you are running from is the threshold? In ancient times, pain was not meaningless. It was a ritual, a rite of passage, the soul's way of saying, you are no longer who you were, you are being initiated. Initiation is never comfortable. It strips you bare, it takes the names you clung to, it dismantles the narrative you told yourself about what your life should look like, and it offers you nothing, at least not at first. There are no guarantees. No roadmap, only silence, only the raw ache of unknowing. This is the desert, the wilderness, the place where the false self cannot survive, and it is here, in this sacred isolation, that something ancient begins to stir. Because real transformation doesn't come wrapped in motivation. It comes wrapped in fire. You scream into the void, and it echoes. You pray, and nothing answers. You collapse, and no one comes to catch you. But slowly, the silence becomes a teacher, and the ache becomes a guide, and the absence of all things familiar becomes the presence of something deeper. Suffering shows you what is real. It burns away what is performative. It exposes what was never stable to begin with. It teaches you the language of surrender. You begin to see that the pain you feared is not just pain, it is process. It is purification. It is the fire that forges. Because the soul does not evolve in comfort, it evolves in collision, in rupture, in the dismantling of who you were never meant to remain. There is a wisdom that only suffering can unlock, not through denial, not through numbing, but through presence, through the willingness to sit in the ashes and not rush to rebuild, through the bravery to stay with the questions long after the answers have abandoned you. And though the world may tell you to move on, to distract, to medicate, to smile again, something within you knows. This sorrow is sacred. This pain is purifying. This moment is not your undoing. There is a process hidden in the dark corners of suffering. Not a cure, not a fix, but a transformation, a holy combustion. This process is not physical. It is psychic. It does not work on your body first. It works on your identity, your attachments, your illusions. It dismantles everything you thought you were and refines everything you never knew you carried. It is alchemy, the turning of lead into gold, but not in the hands, in the soul. You see, we were never meant to stay in the rawness of our pain. We were meant to move through it, to be broken open, to dissolve, and then to be reformed. But the alchemical fire does not begin until you stop resisting the heat. You cannot transmute what you won't acknowledge. You cannot evolve from what you deny. You cannot make gold without sitting with the lead, touching it, grieving it, honoring it. And yes, the lead is heavy. It is the years of silence you carried like armor. It is the words you needed to say but swallowed. It is the dreams you buried beneath the weight of being realistic. It is your rage, your sorrow, your heartbreak, but lead has a purpose. Lead keeps the truth hidden until you are strong enough to hold it. And the moment you stop running, the alchemy begins. You start to realize that pain is not the enemy avoidance is, because when you turn and face your sorrow, when you stay long enough to ask, "What are you here to teach me?" you awaken the inner alchemist. And suddenly, what you thought would kill you becomes your source of power. The betrayal that shattered you teaches you boundaries. The abandonment that scarred you teaches you self-worth. The failure that humiliated you teaches you surrender. You start to extract the medicine from the wound. You cry not just from grief, but from the awe of realizing the depth of your capacity to feel, to endure, to survive. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" And you begin to ask, "What part of me needed to die so that I could live?" Alchemy doesn't rush. It simmers. It burns slowly. It turns the darkest nights into sacred laboratories. Every sleepless night becomes a sacred vigil. Every tear becomes sacred water. Every silence becomes a sacred cave. And slowly, something begins to rise, not the old version of you, patched together and made pretty, but something new, something ancient, something you had forgotten you were capable of becoming. You begin to see beauty in what you once cursed. You begin to bless the moments that once broke you, because now they no longer own you, they no longer define you, they shaped you. Yes, but they did not finish you. The alchemy is not about erasing your wounds. It's about finding the gold inside of them, the wisdom, the resilience, the self that can now stand in the fire and say, "I have become the storm." But this becoming isn't loud, it isn't public, it's quiet, private, reverent, because the real transformations are never announced. They are endured in solitude, realized in silence, and embodied in the way you now walk through the world. Wholeness is not perfection. It is not the achievement of a sanitized life, free of flaws or failure. It is the integration of everything. You are the light and the shadow, the known and the forgotten, the broken and the holy. But here is the truth most are not ready to hear. To become whole, something must be left behind. Not because you're being punished, but because the fullness of your soul cannot exist in a vessel that clings to what was never real. You cannot become who you are meant to be, and keep pretending to be who you are not. There is a cost to becoming, a price to awakening, and that price is sacrifice. The myths have always whispered this. The hero leaves home, the seeker walks into the forest, the initiate enters the cave, not to gain something immediately, but to lose something first, and that loss is sacred. You must let go of the identity that earned you love in exchange for authenticity that may be misunderstood. You must release the comfort of certainty for the rawness of truth. You must surrender the applause of others for the quiet integrity of self. And perhaps most painfully, you must sacrifice the illusions that kept you safe, the illusion of control, the illusion of invulnerability, the illusion that if you just tried harder, you'd never be hurt again. But illusions cannot hold the weight of your soul. They crack, they crumble, and in that crumbling, something real begins to emerge. Wholeness requires you to stop performing and start remembering. Remembering who you were before the world told you who to be, before fear shaped your choices, before survival became your strategy. And to remember, you must let parts of yourself die. Not die in bitterness, but die in reverence. You must lay down your masks like offerings at the altar of truth. You must walk away from roles that no longer nourish your spirit. You must stop watering gardens that only bloom when you are shrinking. This is not abandonment. This is resurrection. But resurrection always follows death. And the death of the false self is not quiet. It screams. It resists. It clings to you like a ghost afraid of the light. Because the ego does not want to be sacrificed. It wants to survive, but the soul has waited lifetimes for this moment where you stop bargaining, where you stop negotiating with destiny, where you stop asking how much of yourself you can keep and still be free. Because freedom does not come in pieces, it comes in wholeness, and wholeness comes when you finally say, I am willing to lose what is not mine in order to become what I truly am. But don't be mistaken, this is not a one-time act. Sacrifice is a rhythm, a sacred rhythm of release. Again and again you will be asked, are you willing to let go of this version of you, so something deeper can be born? The path to wholeness will not ask you to achieve more. It will ask you to release more, to unclench the fist, to untie the knots around your soul, to open the hand and trust that what falls away was never meant to stay. Because when you stop fighting for what is fading, you make space for what is eternal. And what is eternal within you has no fear of sacrifice. It knows that what dies in truth rises in power.